when the nations, when the Ottoman Empire was dissolving, and you had Greece declaring that they were autocephalous and they weren't recognized for a number of years, and each of these other nations. So, you know, to us, it's kind of simple. You know, you said, well, all you have to be is a synod. All you have to do is just say, well, this assembly of bishops, they're all the bishops in this territory, and we're no longer an assembly, we're a synod, and we're going to elect our own head, and then you're an autocephalous church, and you're still one church, but instead of being 14 daughter churches, you're a sister church.
Yeah, actually they're not even daughter churches because the jurisdictions are still part of the mother church.
Well, I'm just, you know...
It's only if they, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, you know, it seems, at least to a layperson, that all of these jurisdictions are under their mother churches, and so there are 14, I call them daughter churches, and they simply become a sister church. It becomes one more of the autocephalous churches. How does that ever happen if you're going to wait for every single other one of them? It seems to me that it's something that all you need is 3 bishops, from what I understand, to decide, and then you have a period of time when people say, well, this is a schism, this is not good, so we have to wait until we have unanimity, and I don't see that that's going to happen in certainly a lot of our lifetimes. Yeah, meanwhile, the church here is bleeding. I don't think anybody can doubt the fact that we're losing generations of faith.
It's not easy to discuss with people who have no idea of the church as being larger than their own parish. And even parishes are parochial in the sense of saying even sometimes they don't want to be really too tied to a diocese. They'd rather be kind of just, you know, parochial. So how do we explain that? I don't think it's ever possible for every person to understand it. But what I do believe is that every good Orthodox Christian, together with the priest and with the bishop, it would be understood and explained that this is how the church is everywhere. Church is local. Church is organized by territory. In this territory we have 4 bishops in various parishes of different backgrounds. Now we're going to have 1 bishop. Those parishes will continue. They'll continue to use the languages they use. But instead of having 4 bishops, one claiming the same territory, there'll be 1 bishop, and he'll have jurisdiction over those. Now, Mr. Grindich, who's a very clever man, he sent out a survey recently to the bishops, and the survey was, I don't remember all of the questions, they were all very pertinent. One was something like, if you were the bishop over a territory in which there were various groups using various liturgical languages, would you be comfortable in serving them? Yes or no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it was. Another one was, is the calendar an issue for you? And that was interesting. They took 4 major groups. They took the Greek Archdiocese, OCA, Antiochian, and Rocourt. And the OCA bishop said calendar is not an issue. And with the Greek Archdiocese, there were some, but it wasn't a major issue. And the Antiochians, it was kind of an issue for some, but not really. But with the Rocourt, it was totally an issue. Totally an issue. So how do you go from those who say it's no issue to those who say it is an issue, it has to be resolved? So those parishioners who attend church in a Rocourt church, well, right now they're an old calendar. My parishes are a new calendar. Somehow we still serve together. Somehow their people can come to mine for liturgy and mine go to theirs. So I don't see that as the issue. It is an issue for some, but I think it's nothing that can't be overcome. But for the individual person who's been taught old calendar, or the Julian calendar as it's called, they see that as a pillar in their orthodoxy. So it's up to the bishops to say it is a pillar. It's our tradition. We believe that this is essential for us or very important for us. However, we also recognize that the rest of the church does not all use the old calendar, the Julian calendar. So we can continue. If the Church of Russia uses the Julian calendar, and the Church of Romania uses the Gregorian calendar, they still have reciprocal services and recognize their sacraments and so forth. So if it's happening in those two nations that butt each other, it can certainly happen in North America, where we're all part of the same territory as well. So I think those are issues that the lay people, as long as the church, and I think she will, as long as the church continues to serve all of her children in whatever language they need, there can be this unity. The administrative part is a different one, especially finances. That's very important as well, finances. How is this structure going to be maintained? And in fact, Alex said something about, it says something about tithing when he was talking about Turkana, is that what the name of it is? Turkana. He mentioned tithing. I said, oh, I heard a word there, tithing. When they start to tithe, then they don't have to, that's great. They're teaching them tithing there? Oh, when I tell my people all tithing, they say it's Protestant. So that's how their churches, that's how the churches go ahead. If you get 10% instead of just 0.5%, you can do a lot more with 10%. Anyway, what can the faithful themselves expect? It depends on how the priest responds to them. The priest depends on how the bishop. Another question there, which came to the fore, was something like the priest and the bishops tended to respond according to a jurisdictional vision of who they are. In other words, they already have a vision of who they are, and that's the vision by which they're going forward, or they're standing still. So that's important for us to recognize that. And more than half the bishops are American-born. And not all the American-born were
converts.
No, well, we're open to, let's say, the administrative unity. So I said, no. So all these factors come in. It's not just a black and white, them and us, English and not English and so forth. No, these are all realities that are being lived in the church in the United States. So I think that it has to come from the patriarchate to say, we release all of you to form a church, do the best you can. That's it. Simplistic.
I had two comments.
Okay.
One, someone has suggested, following along the thing, the last talk, or piece of your talk, that perhaps one way to resolve the issue is have the patriarchate say, you know, by the year of 2030, there will be an autocephalous, self-governing church in the United States. That's the date. Now, it's up to you to work out the particulars, and when we reach that date, fine. If you haven't, we'll decide exactly what's going to be done. That's a sort of a dictatorial approach, perhaps, but the other approach is the one that relies on consensus. And you talked about the fact there's consensus and there's consensus. And I would like to know what you might offer as your definition of consensus. Does consensus mean 100% agreement on a point? Or does it mean 75% or 90% or what?
Thank you.
50+1.
Well, your first question, though, was that the patriarchates would just come down and say, this is it.
By a certain date, you decide
yeah, and
how it's going to be
that's
done.
what next year is supposed to be, 2016. I think. We've had a number of years to prepare this. And we've had 5 years even now. So I would say that the first year or so was a feeling out of who we are, who are you, and I know you, and now I see your face, and now I have to sit next to you and have coffee with you. So I think that we've gotten over that, but I don't think that it was a primary issue for the hierarchs. I perceived at the first meeting that it was not a primary issue for most of them. It was just, we're here, our mother churches said we have to come, this is the assembly, isn't it nice? But to say that from then on they said, golly, we've got 5 years to put this together, let's work night and day, let's really put our problems out there, and, you know, didn't see it. It might just have to be that it comes from the church, which said, this is a diaspora problem, we created it, now it's up to us, the church, but with a blessing from the patriarchates. What was the second one, I'm sorry?
It was about consensus, your thoughts on what does consensus mean?
Yes, consensus.
I know that that's putting you on the spot, I don't.
No, I don't think so. I mean, to me, a consensus is a consensus of our room that I stopped there, yes. That's a consensus. You're all going to say yes, right? Yes. Some of you may say, well, let's go on a little bit more. But I think consensus means, in general, there's at least this willingness to go forward to the next step. It's like climbing a number of steps, I think. You say, this is step one. Okay, step two. Oh, it's getting a little steep now. Let's wait a little. So I think consensus means as far as you're able to go without somebody backing out totally and working out those things. I have no definition of it. I think His Eminence tried very hard to have a consensus of what consensus means, and it didn't really happen. So I think as chairman, it's up to him to keep it moving. And with the other members of the Secretariat, he's trying to do that. And with these committees, I would say the committees in general, except for the one on reforming, the one on youth is very good. Some are lousy, did nothing. Is that still on?
It is.
I'm sorry, no, I mean, that's reality. We didn't take it seriously, all of us, we didn't all take it seriously. And as I say, some did. The one on trying to find a format for unified church, the one on youth, there are some other ones that are equally important.
Care.
I'm sorry?
Pastoral care.
Pastoral care. You know, I was on a committee called Clergy Affairs. And at our first meeting, I said, I don't think that's a good title. So we changed it to Clergy Matters. But that's a very important one, and it did nothing. Did nothing. Did nothing. So I think that I think that yes, consensus means something that you can go, and when there's a consideration to be hesitant, talk it out and go further. Yeah. But that consensus, I believe, can only be fulfilled totally by the church, which means the council. That's George had something.
I was understanding that the report, the consensus, was due by June, so that it could go on to the next step in Europe. Now, if they're not meeting in March, and the report is due in June, what happens? Will there be a report in June?
There has to be some kind of a statement to the pre-conciliar committee
By June.
by June.
So in September, what will the assembly, God bless you.
Excuse me. Consensus.
Gesundheit.
Gesundheit. That's the word. Gesundheit, not consensus. Okay. His Eminence can only do what he can do. So I'm assuming that because there were not enough or many re-proposals, in addition to the two that had been given, that he considered it's not useful to have a meeting in March, but we will have the one in September, and at that one, and if there's something in June, of course, I believe he wouldn't just send out something to the pre-conciliar commission without having sent it to all the bishops first. So that's what I assume will happen by June, and September we'll continue with whatever committee reports we have, or we'll, John, you ready?
Yeah, how long did the Council of Nicaea take? How long did they stay here
Years.
to be?
A few years.
All right, now why is it, this is gonna be a 2-week meeting or something like that? Why don't you stay there until you get something?
You asking me?
He's not
I mean,
invited.
to propose that, I mean, what's the magic about having all of the bishops get
Well-
together and, okay, our 2 weeks is up, let's go home?
Yeah, it may very well be that once they see, or they have the agenda, it may very well be that they'll say, for this first meeting, this is what we'll do. We'll consider the agenda, and then we'll have a period of time, another year, 2 years, whatever. For, I don't know, I mean, that's
I'm
possible.
talking about the great council that
Yeah.
they're talking about next year.
Right.
Why should there be a time limit on that?
Don't forget those councils in the past, the first councils, the first 7, had to deal with theology and doctrine, which are much more profound and essential than what's going to be taught at this one. What's going to be taught at this council is not theology, not Christology, not Trinitarian theology. They're practical administrative things. We'll probably be talking about fasting, maybe remarry our clergy, who are the diptychs historically and all those things. So it may just be that this will be an opening session and they'll say, well, we've done what we can at this point and we'll go on. I don't know. But I agree that it doesn't seem like it's much time. And that's where another issue came up. There were those who said we should discuss everything now so that when we get to the council we can just say we agree. And there are others who said no, we have to wait till we go to the council and discuss, and then we'll see. Wow. So those are two different points of view as to how the work should be done.
Your Eminence, kind of along that line, there is a secretariat
Yeah.
that is working. Is it working effectively? I mean, it could do a lot of the preparation. They know all the ins and outs by now, what this jurisdiction is saying in that one. Are they working to kind of, between the meetings, to solve some of these issues?
Are you speaking about us here or?
Yes, here.
Oh, here. Well, the committees are meeting. The secretariat meets. They review the work that's coming in and doesn't come in. So that's ongoing, and they have a number of committees, as you can see on their website. I think Bishop Maxim of the Serbian Diocese in California is the coordinator of these various committees to make sure that things are being done. So that work continues. I think John is referring to have a general council, an ecumenical so-called council, 2 weeks in duration is unthinkable.
Your Eminence, you mentioned earlier today to us that you will not be invited, or you didn't anticipate an invitation. Why is that, and what is the criteria to get an invitation? Are you loving me yet?
Well, you know, when you give a dinner party, you invite who you want. And maybe your house is this big, so you're not going to invite 1,000. But you invite families, representatives from families, it's enough that they speak for the families. So the fact that we have, I don't know, I assume over 1,000 bishops or more, that's quite a number, logistically and so forth. So I'm assuming that the consensus is, or was, consensus of the patriarchal churches and autonomous is that a certain number of bishops from each church will be invited. Autocephalous churches and autonomous churches. I'm assuming also they'll have some people who are going to come as guests from different churches to see what's happening and so forth. I'm not even sure of the language of this council. It's going to be in Greek, French, English, Russian, translators. So, you asked a lot of questions, but I forgot them all.
Well, I guess the main thing is, you're an archbishop.
Oh, okay, yes.
It seems, you know, I would think maybe they want all the archbishops there. How many archbishops are there if there's 1,000 bishops? Maybe 150? 200 maybe?
I'm
I mean,
sure-
I don't know.
I'm sure there's a number, a sufficient number. I don't think it's, what I understand only is that each church will be allowed a number of bishops, archbishops, bishops, whatever. Patriarchs, I'm assuming, will be there. And so those churches will have representation. The OCA won't have representation as OCA because we're not recognized as an autocephalous church by the whole church. That was something I skipped before, and I'd like to go back to it now so I don't forget it. Really, there's been no agreed upon way in which community is recognized as autocephalous. There are no canons, nothing. It's just how. You had originally the first 4 patriarchates were based on the Byzantine Empire, which was based on the Roman. Major churches, Rome, then in time New Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, and Alexandria. Those were the 4 political divisions of the Roman Empire. And I won't go into the other, like Jerusalem and so forth. So those 4 provinces, or not provinces, those 4 major areas of division, the Church of Rome in time went her own way. So you have Constantinople, which I believe is the only church that granted, allowed autocephaly in her territories. I don't think there's Antioch did not grant anything, maybe Church of Georgia for some reason. The Church of Alexandria didn't grant autocephaly to anybody in Africa. So you have the Church of Constantinople, which now has, close by, Church of Serbia, Church of Bulgaria, Church of Romania, the Church of Russia,
Greece.
Church of Greece. So there was no planned way of how to recognize an entity as being autocephalous. And that's where the rub comes in now. We're trying to say, should it be by declaration of the Patriarch of Constantinople? Should it be by all the mother churches who have jurisdictions here, all of them, when they've all said you're all, each group here is autocephalous or autocephalic? Is it the church together? So that's something that, and maybe that's how the church is. We're not quite so categoric. You fill this in and, you know, put a round hole in a round peg, or square hole in a square peg, and that's how it's done. No. So, and let's remember, the church lives in the real world, which is a political world. So all these churches also have the pressures of living in a society. And society is governed by governments, and governments have their goals and their purposes. So it's not always easy for the church to put aside the reality of where she lives. We know that in the communist times, we know that in the time of the Roman Empire, and in other situations. So for the church, and for us too, we live in a real place. We're kind of like children in a way. We think that all that anybody has to do is say, okay, do this, do this, do this, and you are autocephalic. No, we live in a political climate. And the mother churches live in political climates, and they try to say, not only do you have to find salvation for your eternal soul, but you also have this issue of living here and now and where you are in society. So, what covers it all? Grace of God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.